Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And thank you for joining us. I know we all have busy lives today, and I always appreciate when you choose to spend your time here. And I really I dig to find some great content to make your time worthwhile. And today will be no exception. Today we have the pleasure of talking with Steve Melman about negotiating change in a chaotic world. And we got tips from a psychotherapist. So make sure to stay tuned and grab a writing utensil of some type so that you can jot down some notes or just take it in and enjoy the process. So welcome, Steve. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Well, thank you, Cindy. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you and your audience.
Well, and it should be an interesting conversation. You've got a broad depth of experience. And for our listeners, if you don't happen to know him, Steve Melman is a psychotherapist and the author of Guidance for New Clinicians in a Chaotic World. And he pairs decades of clinical experience with a pretty bold invitation to practice with compassion, with human, and with unwavering commitment to your values, even when the field seems to be pushing you the other way. So he's here today. He's going to share insights with us on navigating mental health challenges, balancing work and personal life, building stronger relationships, and understanding that everyone learns differently. And that's a topic near and dear to my heart. 2 out of 3 of my kids had learning differences, and it was an interesting journey. So we're going to explore how these lessons translate into negotiating not only better relationships with others, but within ourselves. And, we could all use a little more of that in today's fast-paced and often seemingly chaotic world. So why don't we jump in then, Steve? The therapy feels to me at least, like a sort of masterclass in negotiation. You've got relational, adaptive, emotional intelligence, all of those elements. So I wondered what lessons from a clinical practice would you say apply to our broader negotiations in the world? And by that, I mean, negotiating with ourselves, both personally, professionally, with others.
So there's so much to cover. But let me start out when you were talking about your kids and their challenges. Boy, I have my own story that when I was about 13 years old, I was diagnosed with having a reading disorder. We have come so far because now we don't refer to it as disorders, we refer to it as learning differences.
Yeah.
And with the learning disorders, it conjures up people with, they can have low self esteem, they can doubt themselves, they're wondering what's the matter with them. And so I'm glad that we're at this place where we talk about learning differences. And so, again, when I was 13 years old, I was diagnosed with a reading disorder. It helped to shape my personality because when other people toss in the towel, mine is, gee, I wish you hadn't told me that, and I got to prove you wrong. And so probably have many different examples that I could share of not tossing in the towel and having that adage, gee, I'm going to find a loophole how to get around this.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and I want to put a pin for a moment and just, since we've gone there, for any of our listeners, whether you yourself, or particularly if your kids, if you find that they're being channeled or funneled in a particular way in the education system, because we had exactly the same experience, Stephen. I'm with my 2 kids who learned differently. They were on individualized education plans, which never got followed. And of course, they're like, well, the kids aren't asking for them. Well, of course they're not. They're mortified to be centered out in school. But they will also immediately assume that they wouldn't go to university, wouldn't go to college, that they were being channeled a different way. And I had to really advocate and go and meet and jump heads, if you will, to get up. And sure enough, and they both ended up going to university with scholarships. So, but it took a lot of awareness to be able to really, really fight for that. So, and again, sort of circling back to where we started, though, do you have, when you think of your decades of experience as a psychotherapist, are there lessons there that you think translate to the broader world, not just to clinicians?
Oh, absolutely. And looking back upon it, I really wish I had changed the title of my book that people think, well, it wouldn't apply to me because I'm not a clinician, but I wrote it in such a way that anybody who picked it up and could read it, there's all kinds of tips how to help marital couples and how to help parents in their parenting of their kids and
Yeah.
all kinds of different topics that anybody could benefit from.
Dig into that a little bit. So, mental health norms, social expectations, even our cultural values, I think, are shifting like really quickly, more quickly than some people are able to keep up with. So, how do you think we can negotiate? And again, I use that term in the broadest possible sense without sort of capitulating in terms of our cultural values or so, sort of social values when systems are moving faster maybe than we are. Any ideas around that?
So, oh, absolutely. The first thing about negotiating sometimes is negotiating with yourself.
Yeah.
As a clinician, I really a strength based clinician. I'm always looking at people's their strengths. And I always say the opposite of strengths are not weaknesses; they're just things we have not made into strengths yet.
I love that. That's such a great approach.
So so I always say words have power, words have meaning, and so always choose words that are going to help you to motivate yourself. I never use words like failure. So if we weren't successful, that wasn't a failure. It was just a setback. It was a speed bump. And
Yeah.
then so think of it if you're traveling down the road and there's road construction and they take you on a detour and you're always looking to find so how do I get back on the main road? And so detour is just temporary.
Yeah. It's funny. I had a friend who used to talk about failabrations, and I've adopted that. I love it that if we conditioned ourselves differently to see that so-called failures are our greatest opportunities, imagine what a different world it would be, right? I wish I'd be cottoned on to this when my kids were really little, because I would have had every evening at dinner where let's have a failabration. Tell me what's something you feel like you failed that spectacularly today, and what did you learn, right? What a different approach that is. So. But I love your strength based because we all have strengths. And for our listeners out there, if you feel like the world's beating you down a little bit today, make a brag list of the strengths that you have. I think that's a beautiful approach, Stephen. So,
Yes, and I'm very much into list making. So if you listed your strengths, and you would post it somewhere so that it will always remind you of sometimes I'll say to myself, gee, I'm not where I want to be totally, but look at the progress I've made. Sometimes we'll say, gee, who's that old man looking back at me? But I could say, if we could go back in time, maybe we could repeat a time in our life where we would make different choices. And
yeah,
people would go, oh, yeah, I'd love to do that. And I go, well, be careful with that. What would happen if you weren't able to take your current wisdom back with you?
yeah,
We would tend to perhaps make the same mistakes we made the first time around.
yeah,
So with age comes wisdom and how we see the world differently than we did when we thought we knew the world and we thought we knew everything. But as we get older, we tend to find out that, gee, I didn't know as much as I thought I did.
yeah. And it's funny that we catch that later. I find that with women in particular, by the time they hit their 60s, they're like, oh my God, they've let go of all of that external judgment and really start to own themselves. And invariably they say exactly what you just said. Geez, I wish I could go back and redo it. But you're right, without that wisdom from the experience, they would almost certainly go back and fall into those same patterns. It's quite disturbing sometimes. Now, you believe that therapy should be effective, but also human, which I really love that approach. I think we're missing that in a lot of our, different professions in the world today. So how does bringing humor, because I know that's something you feel strongly about, but how does bringing humor and empathy into the therapeutic space act as a tool for, those negotiations, if you will, and for relief, frankly?
I often say that I take when I'm counseling a client, I take very, very serious why people come to therapy. And it's not easy to pick up the phone to initiate the need for help. And I take a moment to celebrate that and then to praise them for that. And so I'm very goal oriented. And I say, it doesn't have to be an oxymoron that when you come to therapy, it's got to always be serious. It takes me back to when I was in school, and it was hard for me to concentrate for a whole hour.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't exactly the class clown, but at the same time, I needed to add a little levity.
Yeah.
But I always seem to know how far to push the envelope with teachers.
Yeah.
So that the break and that levity helped me to take a break and then come back and reconcentrate. And so that I use that in therapy too. I said, we've been doing a lot of hard work this session. How about if we do something different? So we may tell a joke
Yeah.
or may talk about something that's in the news. I was a big Paul Harvey listener, and he used to talk about at the very end of his show, he would talk about dumb criminals, and he would tell stories about
Yeah, I
just
remember.
just to add humor. And
Yeah.
I also think a lot about we never learn when we're the ones doing talking. So listen and listen intently. And sometimes when I'm counseling clients, I'll have a hunch and I'll say, "Gee, let me share this with you and see if I'm close." And I'll think about all of us are sort of like puzzle pieces, and so our goal is how to put those puzzle pieces together. And so with hypothesis hunches, I'll take a stab and say, "Does this fit for you?" And then how to share that in a humanistic way, in a very encouraging way, that is strengths based, that's humor based. But the goal is how to accomplish people's counseling goals in the most effective humanistic way.
Oh, that's so powerful. And Worth, I want to just spend a moment to let that settle for our listeners there as well, because as you were saying that about being not quite the class clown, but that, man, did that strike a chord with me because my middle child, one who was on the IEP and, was, what do they call it, neurodivergent, they call it now, learned differently. He absolutely always used humor. And I think it can often be an effective sort of a defense mechanism almost, right? Within certain settings. And also, I want to take that not only in therapy, as Stephen's talking about, and in life, his life experience. I want to really encourage you, for as our listeners out there, humor in any negotiation can be such a valuable tool, and it is so underutilized. Whether you're negotiating with your kids, whether you're negotiating with your intimate partner, if you're in really intense business deals, everybody gets, as you were saying, Stephen, that serious hat on. And I really invite you to bring some levity, bring some lightness. And even and especially in your negotiations with yourself, be able to laugh at yourself, be able to have fun about those things that you are stressing about or beating yourself up about. When you're able to look at it and do it with humor rather than self-flagellation, you're going to go a lot further. And I really want to put a pin in what Stephen was saying about listening. It is probably the single most important element that we miss in negotiations today. We, in North America in particular, do not listen well. We are not taught to listen well. We wrongly believe that the person talking the loudest and the longest is the one who is winning, and we overvalue extrovertism. So, really, I encourage you to start training yourself to listen. Just bite your tongue and take in what somebody's saying, not waiting for your turn, but truly seeking to understand what it is. Where are they coming from? What is behind the words that they're saying, even? So,
Yeah. I was just going to say that sometimes I hear these things and I go, huh. What you were saying about listening, sometimes somebody said we only listen to about 60% of what people are saying. And you go, 60%? That seems so low. And then, but as you think about it, oftentimes when people are talking, we're not fully engaging with them. We're thinking about, so what am I going to do for lunch?
yeah.
Or I can't wait for them to stop talking so that I can challenge them.
Yeah.
So to fully engage and really listen to them. And so when a person finishes talking, rather than you saying, now let me tell you how I see it, instead I encourage people to summarize what you heard them say.
Yeah.
And so if I heard you correctly, I heard you say da 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 da. Am I accurate? And let those, as you said, let those words sink in of what the person was trying to convey. And sometimes you might say, well, gee, until you verbalize what you were thinking, I hadn't seen it in exactly the same way until you verbalized it. Now I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, such a valuable tool. And like, so reflecting back to them what they've said and ask questions, right? Like, I mean, if so, and especially when we see the world is getting so divided and so polarized, and neither side is listening to each other. There's no space to be able to learn or grow. So listen. Even when you do, and not waiting, as Stephen says, for your turn to challenge them, but then ask, well, I'm curious, tell me what led you to believe that, or what are some ask questions, truly seek to understand before you seek to impose your view. And I wanted to circle back for a second, Stephen, because it's percolating in the back of my mind as we're speaking about that labels. Like you talked about, well, at least now we're call it, learning differently rather than learning disabilities or learning disorders. How can reframing labels help people negotiate better relationships with themselves, with their families, and even in professional settings? How important is that?
Yes, it's so important of how you see yourself. to be introspective. Just because somebody labels you doesn't sort of like, well, who set them up to be the expert?
Yeah.
So let me just tell you just a quick story to finish that story. So how I got diagnosed was that there was a psychologist that provided all these psychological tests. And then they told my parents, as I recall, I don't remember exactly how it was told to me, but my parents were told, if your son graduates from high school, be proud of him because we don't think he can go much further than that
Wow.
based upon these tests we gave.
Yeah.
It's so important to say, oh, who set that person up to be an expert? Because one of the things I'll say is just because somebody said this about me, there's one thing that the test can't measure, which is motivation.
Yeah.
If I'm willing to do the hard work, the same grade as somebody else who had it easier, where in the teacher's grade book does it say that one person's A is more important than another person's A?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all about motivation, how they see themselves, and again, it's all strengths based.
Yeah. And I want to really obviously the more you're talking about, gosh, we could have done a whole episode on this where, maybe we'll come back and revisit it because our education system is, at different points through history, pushed by different agendas, right? I mean, you think back to the old, back in the old Greek sort of philosophical, like everybody knew the classics and they thought deeply. And then you had that sort of Prussian model where everybody was being made to be little soldiers. And then we translated with that, when Carnegie got involved, and then it was all about building little consumers. So be careful about how skewed the testing angles even are, because, as Stephen's saying, it doesn't measure for motivation. It doesn't measure for impact. I mean, some of the people who've had the most profound impact on the world aren't people who can study and cram for a test and regurgitate it the next day and get that A plus, and then forget it or not be able to apply it in any meaningful way. So it doesn't account for creativity. So be careful letting yourself be labeled or your kids be labeled. I challenge you to maybe think about where you're labeling people in your life as well without a foundation. And so, see, I want to make sure we get to talk because I know for a lot of people now, stress management is a challenge, right? I mean, there's just so much stuff coming at us, so much negativity that we're seeing increases in procrastination and stress and time management because people are finding it challenging, I think, to even focus and stay motivated, as you say. So, I think these are areas where most of us struggle silently because we often think it's just us who's sort of failing at the task. So, what strategies do you have or would you recommend for negotiating a healthier relationship with time and productivity and avoiding burnout?
Okay, boy, that's a lot. Because,
Yes.
as I said, I'm a list maker. If this helps you, oftentimes when we think about in what areas would I make a list, and you say, well, how about a grocery list? Well, if it makes sense to you to use it in one sense, why wouldn't it work in something else? So the very first thing I do every single morning is I make a task list, and the task list can grow. I'm prioritizing what tasks need to be accomplished in what order, how to prioritize them, how to cross them off, how at the end of the day you can look at not what I didn't accomplish, but look at all the things I did. How productive was my day? I always want to say, if you think about the old and work, we used to clock in and clock out.
Yeah.
I always want to make sure that I have an end to my day. I want to make an exception, not the rule, that I'm going to always stay late. I want to make that my exception. So at the last hour of my day, I'm going to look over my list one more time. In the last hour, what must I accomplish
Yeah.
before I leave? And prioritize. And so I will say, if it's inputting data into a computer versus making phone calls, I'll always say data can't complain,
Yeah.
but people can. So
Yeah.
it's always about the relationships you're building with other people. So it's always making your phone calls at the end and making that choice between, do I input data or do I make those phone calls? And whatever I don't accomplish today will still be there tomorrow. And so I'll start a new task list, maybe the last 5-10 minutes of tasks I didn't accomplish.
Yeah.
So that's all about time management. I used to mentor people, and I would always say to them in an effective way, this job can swallow you up like a tsunami.
Yeah.
And I let those words sink in, and then I finish the sentence, if you don't have good organizational skills.
Yeah.
And it's how to organize. There's so many things when I was working with an employee assistance program, and there was 25 tasks we were accomplishing in a single day, and you had to keep all that straight, and knowing that sometimes you were waiting for other people to give you information, and so you couldn't finish the task until somebody provided you that data, that information. So it's keeping yourself notes to yourself. So that helps you with organization, helps you with time management, taking frequent breaks. That helps you with stress management.
Yeah.
So my mind goes in all these different directions. We say to kids, but we don't teach them effective ways about time out.
Yeah.
Parents will say with clenched teeth, go sit in this time out.
I know it's a punishment instead of a life skill set.
And I said, would it be helpful to teach kids effective ways for time out and how adults can use time out in effective ways?
Yeah.
And so when our wits are challenged, when we're stressed, with our fists clenched and our eyes are dilating, and we feel like the blood is rushing to our ears and our head, I say, we can say phrases like, I need to process what you just said.
Yeah.
Or you've given me some things to think about. Let me get back to you on that. Yeah. Let me sleep on it. Let me table that. Let me come back to that. There's lots of things we can say that buys ourselves time to get our wits about us and to practice stress management through time out, and then come back and say, now that I have a chance to think about it, let me share where I'm coming from.
Oh my gosh, there was so much there. We're going to have to take that clip and get that out there. And I want to unpack a little bit of that for our listeners, because there were so many beautiful golden nuggets in there, Stephen. And one, let's start from the back end and then work our way back to the answer. Quiet. We are not conditioned to allow ourselves space, time. We get stuck in these to-do loops, and we don't allow ourselves the time to think, to regroup, as you say, whether in a specific situation, to be able to think, to allow yourself to give a more thoughtful answer, but even just time to think about where we want to be in life, where we're going. So I love that idea. And you touched on this idea when you said about your list and the must. And I don't think we focus enough for our listeners on prioritizing. And that really struck me. I happened to be the last 2 days I was in this writing workshop, and he asked us to make a list of all the books that we thought we could write. It was like that kind of workshop. And then everybody was furiously writing down all these books. And then he asked a question that totally flipped my mindset. And he said, if you knew, heaven forbid, knock on wood and all that, but if you knew you only had 2 years, what would be the book that you had to get out there? And it totally changed my thinking. And so I encourage and challenge for our listeners out there, apply that to your life, your to-do, whether at work, whether in your personal life. We've got all these to-do lists. I guarantee you that if you track all of your to-dos for a week, and then you made a list of all of your actual priorities in life, probably most of the stuff that you're tacking on your to-do list are not actually your priorities in life. So in the big picture, as with Stephen's talking about this priorities, but also to the micro job, I want to really put a pin in that. And last but not least, when you started this sort of beautiful conversation around stress management, it really struck a chord with you when you said about we focus so much on the things that we didn't do, and we don't credit ourselves enough with our accomplishments. And I think they've done studies on this. I mean, that the negative space we take up, beating ourselves up about where we see ourselves having failed or not achieved certain things, if we spend that time, just flip that on priding ourselves on the stuff we have accomplished, it's a game changer. So Stephen, thank you for that answer. Was so thoughtful and so helpful. And I wanted to talk too, we've got so much ground to cover here. Relationships. I know you do a lot of work with couples, and you advocate bonding exercises. And I'm wondering, and to me, that's a form of negotiating sort of the depth of our relationship. Where so often our relationships feel like a tug of war rather than an opportunity for even deeper connection. So I wondered if you could just share maybe one or two of your favorite exercises there that people could use, whether as a couple, or I don't know if they apply for your kids as well.
Sure. One more thing I just wanted to add to the previous segment, which is about words. When there's a new expression, I don't know how new it is. I'm trying to advocate the use of it, and that is shoulds. And what I'll always say is make sure that you're not shoulding on yourself.
Yes. It's a kiss and death. I mean, we do. I'm constantly calling my daughter. I thought, oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. I'm like, so yeah, very destructive. So that's great advice.
So coming back to couples. So yes, I always say that if I'm going to give a homework assignment, I want it to be informative and I want to make it fun at the same time. So once upon a time, there was a game show called the Newlywed Game. And so there's this belief that the longer we've been together as a couple, we know everything there is to know about each other. And that's just a myth. That as we get older, the things I thought I knew about myself or knew about the world, it changes.
Yeah.
Now, there's a core about us that our values are that are near and dear to us. Those are less likely to change. But priorities or how I see the world or how we as individuals or we as couples, some of those things might change. And if you're not having those conversations with each other, we can miss that. So something like the Newlywed Game is a way of bonding yourself with each other. So when the two of you are apart, pose questions that you want to ask your partner when you are together. And so it could be anything from things that we recall when we first met each other or bucket list kinds of topics. Asking questions like, so if your favorite music artist was to come to town, who would you not want to miss?
Yeah.
Or something, who's your favorite actor or actress, favorite movie? I'm a big on music, so I would ask questions about songs that made a difference in your life, that resonated with you, all kinds of different things we can ask. And then if it was that favorite musical artist, we can sometimes use information that people give us. So with my own wife, doesn't keep up with current events, who's coming to town. And so I found out her favorite musical artist was to come to town, and I would have missed that if she hadn't shared that with me. And I was the first person to hear that. And so I made a whole evening revolving around her and what she shared with me and questions I asked about favorite cuisines and restaurants. And the whole night was for her.
Oh, I love that. I love that. It's funny as you're saying that, I'm smiling because I was thinking, and sometimes it's the little things, right? My husband and I, after, almost 30 years, and at first, I thought he was being passive aggressive. At first, it was funny, but he invariably, if he goes to a farmer's market or something, he'll come back and he'll bring strawberry jam, proud as a peacock, saying, I got your favorite jam. And I like strawberry jam, don't get me wrong, but raspberry's my favorite. We've had the conversation probably a million times. Are you kidding me? So that's hilarious. Okay, I love that. The Newlywed Game. It's a blast from the past.
And then one more thing is bonding with each other doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah.
My wife and I, she was kind enough to snag me a parking card so I could park in the same covered lot where she parked.
Yeah.
And we parked on the same level. We, of course, had keys to each other's vehicles. And invariably, when I had the time, I might write her a note and put it on the front seat of her car.
Yeah.
And she's a nurse, and so she would have these overnights. And so by the time I got home from private practice clients, she'd already be gone for her overnight as a nurse. So she'd have a note on my pillow. It's just the little things. If you're packing, the other person's packing their lunch, slip a note in there. Text them during the day and say, hey, I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
Everybody loves to be thought of.
Yes. I love that. And as I'm thinking, I'm looking more serious here now because we're not doing that anymore in our relationship. And you're right, it is important. And those latter ones, especially, not just with your intimate partner, but with your kids, with your friends, with, if your grandparents or whatever, just drop a line, right? And God forbid, send a letter, an old fashioned, send a letter, send a card, right? So, and even just time, as you were saying that, Steve, I was thinking, my son and I last night just laid out on the back deck looking up for the meteors. And it was a gorgeous experience. We often don't slow down or take those moments to just appreciate. So thank you. I think that's great advice. And flipping that to parenting, parenting today, and I think it all, has always come with its own set of certainly negotiations, but today even more so around screen time and independence and boundaries. So do you have any quick suggestions for ways parents can shift from the power struggles that we so often see to more collaborative negotiations with their kids?
I'm going to go in this direction, and I hope it fits. It's so important that when kids are young, kids want to be helpful. As parents, it would really be beneficial if you encourage their wanting to be of help. Encourage that, foster it, helping kids with household tasks, anywhere from setting the table to helping encourage them to cook, stirring a pot, helping with yard work. It's easier to encourage that when they're young than when you've never done that before. You're just going to be in my way. And now, when they're teenagers, you want their help, and but you didn't foster that, you didn't encourage that, and so now it's foreign to them. It's not novel anymore. What it means to be a family where everybody pitches in, and
Yeah.
make it fun. So
Yeah.
if together as a family, if we did these tasks in the morning, how about if we do something, and it doesn't have to be expensive? How about if we do something together as a family in the afternoon? So it's a beautiful day. How about if we have a picnic uh, um, as a reward for all of us pitching in and taking care of the household task in the morning?
Yeah. Well, I'm
So
glad you went that direction. When you said, "Oh, I'm not sure if it's going to fit," I think that's a beautiful fit because we forget it so often today. And everything today rewards busy, busy, busy. I mean, we've all become almost martyrs, right? Bragging. You get a bunch of mothers together at the schoolyard talking about, "Oh, I didn't even have time for this and I don't have time for that." We wear it a bit like a badge of honor. And the victims in that are with the kids because we don't let them help mix the batter because it's faster to do it yourself, frankly, right? Or, and we even with the stuff they're trying to do for themselves, school projects, we jump in to help them to get it done faster, better. And it really also affects their self-esteem. So when you let them do it and you praise them for their
yeah,
efforts, even when they get it wrong, it circles back, I think, to what you're saying, Stephen, about that failing, right? It reframes how we look at reward the effort, even.
yeah.
So I love that.
And the words we use when we praise them for their help and embellish it. I
Yeah.
couldn't have done this without your help.
Yes.
Really? And then say that to the rest of the family later on. So and so helped me with this dinner tonight or whatever, or this yard work, and I could not have gotten it done without their help. The example that you were giving about people and all the things on their plate. Well, imagine if you could help others, your kids, your partner could take some things off of your plate.
Yeah.
How much of a difference would that make in your ability to manage your own stress?
Yeah. Yeah. And praise takes so little, and we
Oh,
don't, we
yes.
don't do it enough. I mean,
No.
it's such a simple thing. And one last thing, and we're running out of time here, but I have so much more I want to explore with you. Social media. I know it's something that you talk about, and we've been talking about the challenges today, about the division and the social media just seems to be taking such a toll on so many people. So do you have, I believe you have some tips or ideas about how we can renegotiate, if you will, our relationship with social media so it supports rather than undermines our well-being? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Again, my mind goes in all these different directions, but one of the things I would say is who's mastering who? Am I deciding how much time I'm going to spend on social media, or have I become captive to it? How much of it's taking over my life, and
Yes.
how much importance am I putting over what other people think, rather than how I think of myself, my own self-esteem? And parents need to really take a look at being involved with social media, with how it's impacting their kids,
Yes.
and how kids can be bullied in social media. Maybe as parents thinking about limiting how much time kids are, and monitoring what kids are exposed to. That there's just so much, and how important we put on their self-esteem through social media. Boy, have things just rapidly
Oh,
changed,
yeah.
and where there's not as much importance on face-to-face connections
I
anymore.
know. Yeah. Yeah, so important. And curate your content. And actually, two things. I want to really focus on that last point when you said about make time for face-to-face connections. Okay. Yes, it's great that we've got these avenues now where you can keep in touch with people from high school who may be, far away from you and you drop a note, but make time for meaningful connection. I mean, it's foreign to get on the phone anymore and actually have a conversation with somebody, let alone say, let's get together for lunch or let's do something where we're having that connection. But also circling back to the earlier point you made, Steve, I want to really put a pin for our listeners as well. Curate the content. Most people I know, and I would suggest The vast majority of people spend inordinate amounts of time reading things on social media that outrage them, that upset them, that are negative and strip them of hope. So look for positive content. Like to the extent that you're going to spend time, look for the things that are going to uplift you. And if there are certain people or programs or things that are popping up in your feed that are constantly negative, X them out. You can actually stop that content from showing up in your social media. So thank you for that, Stephen. I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts you've had in your life? And it doesn't have to be about therapy or any of the stuff we've talked about, just one of those aha moments for you that makes you think differently, that impacted your life.
Actually, I have so many different examples, but again, I want to circle back to things that were told to me that I couldn't accomplish. That was just a mind shift to be able to say, been so many times when other people have told me the things I couldn't do. And so my mind always wanders back to finding those loopholes, taking what people tell me I can't do and reminding myself of examples of what I have accomplished when others told me I couldn't. So I'll just give you just a real quick one. Yeah, this is about the sort of therapy. So when I was wanting to build a private practice, and I was wanting to get on all these managed care groups and insurance panels, and some of them were kind enough to be frank with me, and they said, "Steve, you're practicing in Dallas. Dallas is such a large market. We can't allow everybody to be on our panels. So we're not allowing new people to be on our panels." And my first thought was, boy, that's just discriminatory. If I meet all your criteria,
Yeah.
why can't I be on your panel? And so my first thought was, somebody ought to sue you. I didn't say that out loud.
Yeah.
Then my mind started wandering to, I wonder if there's a loophole.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's another way around this. And so I wish I could tell you I was the one who thought of it oftentimes. And I always say to people, you don't have to be the one who invents the wheel. Find other people who've done it before you and follow in their footsteps.
Yeah.
So I had an individual all I had to do was follow in their footsteps, and they had established a private practice in a rural area, and then they also wanted to practice in Dallas. And so they came back to the same people who had denied them and said, "I want to practice in both locations. Would you allow me to?" And they said, "Well, yeah, we'll need the clinicians in this rural area. It's underserved." And
Yeah.
so, yes, to allow you to practice in the rural area, yeah, we'll also allow you to practice in Dallas too. And at the same time, I had an individual who was giving up their private practice in a rural area, and they offered me their private practice. And for 9 years, I was on a panel for both locations. And I
Yeah.
finally said, I think I'm ready to let go of the rural area. And so they never denied me or
Yeah.
kept me from being practicing in Dallas.
Yeah.
So I always look back upon those examples and say, watch out when people tell you what you can't do. You say to yourself, gee, I bet there's a workaround. I bet there's a loophole.
That is such great advice. And not only what other people tell us we can't do, but ourselves, right? How often do we stop ourselves because we're like, I can't see the path there. And I love that. Find a way around, right?
All right. So one more example. So once upon a time, I was teaching college students how to be successful in college, and there was an individual who's over all the instructors, and she was requiring the instructors to teach their classes how to juggle, right, as in beanbags, as in tennis balls. And I made the mistake of saying to her, "Well, gee, how am I going to teach the class if I don't know how to juggle?" And her comment was, "I guess you're going to have to learn." So as I'm learning, I mistakenly use this word. I always say words have power, words have meaning, and you don't want to use the word can't.
Yeah.
Once you put that word, now you have two challenges: learning how to juggle and overcoming that word can't.
Yes.
So when I'm teaching kids and adults how to juggle, I'll say to them, "Can you toss? Can you catch?"
Yeah.
Juggling beanbags is nothing more than tossing and catching.
Yeah.
If you can toss and you can catch, then you can learn how to juggle.
Yeah.
And when I'm teaching people how to juggle, it's very, very much encouraging. When they drop a beanbag, you go, well, everybody does that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's such powerful advice, that word can't, right? I mean, I'm sure I drive people crazy with it, but I point it out always now, even in our, we have an authors association locally here that I had founded. And invariably when we're having our little round table, some people are like, well, I can't do that, or I can't do that. I always point it out. And then you can see the mindset shift kind of go click as they open themselves to the possibility, right? It's beautiful. So
And how you use that to overcome that can't, which is to say, so in life, there's all going to be challenges. So you say that eventually you're going to go from algebra to calculus to all kinds of things. But every step is predicated on learning the step before it. Nobody jumps in and does the most complicated step. No, you're learning the one before it.
yeah, yeah, that's so true. And actually, that you got, I'm trying to wrap up here, and you just keep giving me more nuggets. And I just want to end with this, that next step idea. Think about where you want to be in 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, whatever that plan is. And I think we often give up because it seems so overwhelming, but just think, what's the first step that I would need to take to move me towards that? And then the next step, when we break it down into those pieces, they become manageable suddenly, and you're moving. Nobody goes from here to there, rarely, a few things in life. So I like Steve, you have just been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for sharing your insights here. We definitely want to have you back sometime to explore some more of these concepts to make our lives better. So thank you.
But thank you, Cindy. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you and your audience.
Yeah, and where can people learn more about you and your book?
Okay. So again, I really want to encourage you, pick up the book. I think you could benefit. It's just not for clinicians. It was written to help clinicians, but anybody who picks it up can benefit. And so I have both a website, Stephen Melman, psychotherapist.com. And if you want to purchase the book, you can find the book through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, wherever you purchase book online.
Beautiful. And I'm a big fan too of independent bookstores. And also it'll help, Stephen, if you go to your local bookstore and ask them for the book, because it raises their awareness now and increases the chances that maybe they'll get it in. So, and don't panic if you didn't get that down. I know that's sort of a mouthful with the Stephen Melman psychotherapist.com. We'll make sure to put it in the show notes so that you can come back and grab that, as well as the title of his book and where you can get it. And I hope this conversation stirred something in you. I know it certainly did for me. Whether you're a clinician, a leader, or someone just intent on living life with heart and conviction, make sure, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, so that you never have to miss an episode, and that it can help you negotiate what matters most in your life. And give the gift of sharing. Share this episode with other people in your life. There were so many valuable tips here. If you implement even one of them, it could up-level the quality of the life that you're living and for those around you. And if you're ready to tap into your inner power with grace, with empathy and firmness, I'd love to help. So check out my programs at artoffemininenegotiation.com, and let's negotiate the life you truly want. Make sure to grab a copy of my book, Art of Feminine Negotiation, if you have not done that yet. And this isn't just a show, it's an invitation to own your worth, to negotiate with heart, and to spark change in your world and beyond. And that's a wrap for this episode. So now go forth and renegotiate your life beyond a life that you thought maybe you had to settle for. And remember that every moment is a negotiation. So choose presence, choose power, choose purpose. I like to think of this as not just a podcast, but a movement. You can be part of something bigger, and together we can redefine power, one conversation, one negotiation at a time. So join the movement. Lead the change, and lead with heart, negotiating like the powerful force of nature that you are and were meant to be. And remember, feminine doesn't mean weak, it means unstoppable. So until next time, take care.